President of the Pan-African Psychology Union, Professor Saths Cooper, is joining us now on the line to expand on a leading story, much of President Cyril Ramaphosa really speaking about a report analyzing 30 years of democracy. Professor Cooper, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. This is a report which is the fifth review of its kind since 1994. It's given a critical outlook of what has been done over the 30 years since South Africa's democracy. President Cyril Ramaphosa having admitted that the promise of 1994 has not yet translated into meaningful change sought and deserved. What is your take?
I think he's being accurate. I think the report has statistics that are undeniable. However, there are gaps, and the gaps are in how we interpret those and how we compare this 30th anniversary report to previous reports. So if we were to look at the first 5 years, we see from on almost zero apartheid base, huge strides made. Key areas are on infant mortality, nutrition, and so on, affecting new babies and younger infant children. That, if you compare it to now, is a huge gap. And that's why earlier in your broadcast, there are health specialists who've complained about that. But if we look at it holistically, these stats are revealing. They reveal that certain things have happened. They also show the areas where there's huge retrogression. And those areas are the ones that any government needs to address. We cannot wait for another plan of action over the next few years. We need to be able to track these almost on a quarterly basis and highlight certain key areas. One, we need to highlight the protection of our citizenry from the kinds of dangers they confront in our society, because ultimately a state's job is to protect its citizens, to keep them in good health, and give them a basic and quality education. Now, those three areas we fall short of, and the report does not tell us how we're going to get to that in the next 5 years. So those gaps are massive. There are also some ironies in how these have been put out. For instance, right at the concluding part of the report, it talks of we will commemorate the 30th anniversary of democracy. I'm sure they mean celebrate, but I think they got so caught up in some of the naysaying and the doom and gloom that it's almost like it's knee-jerk, we commemorate events. We should not commemorate democracy because it's not dead. There are all indices that it's thriving. However, in its implementation, particularly another story that you've covered, and that is the separation of powers between the judiciary and other arms of government, that needs to be much more robust. We need to see that individual parliamentarians, and for the first time, we have that opportunity to have so-called independents. I think a lot of them will probably join with one or the other group in parliament should they be successful. The entire methodology of getting to government flies in the face of what the president spoke of when he referred to the Freedom Charter.
Yeah, so Professor, if you'll allow me to just interrupt you there, in scrutinizing the Freedom Charter's aspirational principles of freedom and democracy, a number of commitments were made there, like the people shall govern. But that's not really the case, because the reality is that while democracy is stable, for one, you say democracy is not dead, South Africans are perhaps feeling a little disillusioned. Most no longer want to even vote. The economy is performing way below its full potential, unemployment is high, and so forth. I mean, you've covered health, you've covered judiciary and the rule of law. What's your take on this aspect?
On the Freedom Charter and its 10 major principles, even if, I'll be kind, even if 2 of those major principles were covered fairly well, I will not be critical at all. I will take a vow of silence in the next 5 years. But the very opening principle, which you've referred to, the people shall govern, says every man and woman shall have the right to vote for and to stand as a candidate for all bodies which make laws. We've not had that. We're far away from achieving it. And if the current government continues on its way, there will be more disaffection. Young people will not vote. Indeed, we have a failure of some of those institutions that are laudably referred to in this very thick report and are trotted out as gains of democracy, particularly Chapter 9 institutions. The IEC is very important for us because in just under 3 weeks, we'll be voting. The IEC should be not waiting for young people to register. They should take the Home Affairs database. They should do what Model C and private schools do. They get you an ID card before you and as you turn 18. Why shouldn't they start registering young people in their 18th year? Why should we be reactive? And particularly when our country comprises at least 60% of the population under 30. The number of under 30 voters registered is a crying shame. So we're not doing what we should be doing. These are basic things. They're not going to cost us money. We should also get rid of some of these institutions in the manner in which they cost us a lot of money. We're not seeing the benefits of democracy extending to all people. And the second part of that people shall govern clause says all people shall be entitled to take part in the administration of the country. That is not happening. It's very far from the truth because people queue in local government queues, they queue in government offices, regional and otherwise, and that seems to be part of the life of the majority of people. Queuing, waiting, getting close to the counter and then saying, I'm going for lunch, I'm taking a tea break and come back tomorrow. That kind of callousness needs to change, particularly in the people-friendly customer interface with the majority of citizens, the majority of whom right now are out of the democratic system as we know it. They're not voting. They are beggars in the land of their birth. They see very few horizons except the lousy 350 amounts, which was supposed to be only during COVID. Nothing has been done to shift that to something that gives meaningful dignity and place to our citizens. We don't learn from those G20 countries that we proudly say we are a part of. Those countries have a welfare blanket. We don't. If we think the SASA grants and these other silly grants, which don't make ends meet, are welfare, then we've got a long way to go because we are the richest country on the continent. We're not making the riches that a few still control. There's a flight of capital.
That actually brings me to my next question, Professor. As we talk about the Freedom Charter, I mean, the deal which says all national groups shall have equal rights. I mean, more so because a massive chunk of people in society are free and equal on paper, right? But the economic barriers endure, many of which were created under apartheid. In fact, Professor, the World Bank has ranked South Africa as the most unequal country in the world. What will it take to ensure some real, tangible process insofar as inequality is concerned?
I think that we need to change how we're doing business. There's sections there dealing with how we need to unearth the potential of state-owned enterprises. Indeed, the opposite has happened under this current president's term of office. Many of our state-owned enterprises are bankrupt, literally and figuratively. They add to our debt burden. The ratio of debt to income, in however you like to phrase it, is horrendous. The children who are not voting right now, their great-grandchildren will not extinguish that debt. We need to think differently. You see, this report is written very technically. It's got good stats. It's written by people who are in the economic train of democracy. It does not address the issues from the viewpoint of those beyond the peripheries, those who live in street corners, those who are in shacks, and those who simply have given up hope. Let's not create conditions for another July 2021 to happen, because it will happen if we forget the majority of our people. We cannot allow that number of people to go hungry each night, wake up each morning, not attending school, and we're talking about bringing them back into the education system 30 years after democracy. I mean, some of those things are good on paper. There need to be clear, concrete plans to get there.
Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion. Let's perhaps leave it there for now. President of the Pan-African Psychology Union, Professor Saths Cooper, joining us for that discussion, of course, breaking down some of the elements of looking back and really taking stock of the 30 years of democracy.